Hello, caller. Hello. Hi, my name is Mike. How are you?
Ma'am, I'm bringing your mat to the car. Hurry up. The mother's I'm holding it.
Oh, wow.
Hello.
Hi, how are you?
We're well, thanks. How are you?
Fine, my name is Mike.
Hi, Mike.
And
Gloria.
what's
and
your-
Tom.
Wait, hi. Are you from Miami? You're from Miami?
No,
No.
we're from New Jersey.
Oh,
We're taking a class with Rabbi Smith, and he told us about this program tonight.
right.
So
I happen to be blind myself, and I'm looking forward to it.
Now, do you live in Florida?
Yeah, I live in Aventura, Florida, part of Miami.
Nice
Where in
weather.
Where in Jersey do you live?
About a half hour from Lakewood, right
Uh-huh.
outside of Princeton.
Yeah.
Hello, everybody. Welcome. Nice to see everybody.
Thank you. Nice seeing you. Are we still muted?
Yeah.
No, not. I unmuted us.
Yeah, I've been to New Jersey. Like New Jersey, it's a nice place.
Well, we like it except when there are hurricanes and snows and blizzards and
Oh, you know who's back on radio in New York? Cousin Brucey.
That'd be great too. Okay,
On WABC.
so what am I looking at?
You're on.
You're looking at us.
What? I'm into broadcasting quite a bit. I keep up with radio all the time. How's the weather in Jersey?
today is nice.
Usually it's cold and raining.
Yeah.
Today we had sunshine.
As you know, London is notorious for its cold, rainy weather. And when
Oh.
we visit our son and daughter-in-law in London, their friends always ask me how London weather is treating us. I tell them it makes me feel right at home in New Jersey.
Yeah.
Oh, is my sound on?
Sound is off.
Oh, you hear me, Deborah?
Yes, we can hear
Sound,
you.
with Rabbi Smith is on.
Oh, but ours is muted. And you don't hear me.
Yeah. I hope this year is a better year for me
For everybody.
than last year.
Ladies and gentlemen, I hope you can all hear me. This is a wonderful opportunity for us all to get together, and so happy to see all of you together here with this inspirational and motivational lecture by the Honorable Justice Richard Bernstein. I must tell all of you that having the pleasure of meeting Richard, he is one of the warmest, kindest, and humblest person I've met. Very, very, such an honor to really have gotten to know him a little now. And it is truly a pleasure to be able to have him, to host him at the United Jewish Generations event tonight. I do want to begin with a word of Torah. And so this week in the Torah portion, we read the portion called Shemos, which talks about the beginnings of Moses, how Moses became the leader of the Jewish people. And one of the stories that we read in the Torah portion this week is the story of how Moses saved the Jewish man who was being beaten by an Egyptian. He was being beaten to death, and Moses saved his life, saved this man's life by killing the Egyptian. Moses found out that there were people who were going to snitch to the authorities on what Moses did. And at that time, as you know, the Jewish people were enslaved. And imagine saving a Jew and killing an Egyptian in those days obviously was punishable by execution. And so Moses, it says in the Torah, Moses became afraid. And the surprising thing is he was afraid, but he didn't run away. He was afraid and he just seemed to wait. And ultimately he needed to run away when they caught him. And then miraculously, he was able to run away. So the question is, if he didn't run away, why does the Torah tell us that he was afraid? His fear did nothing. He was afraid, but he didn't do anything about it. And later on, when they caught him, of course, he ran away. So why does the Torah tell us that he was afraid? And the rabbis of the Medrash, they tell us that Moses did something. The Torah is telling us something, a lesson that we should learn from. And that is that in a certain sense, fear brings about challenges. That if we are afraid of something, that thing might happen. The fear actually brings about the problems. Being afraid brings problems. We should have full trust in Hashem. If we were to have full trust in Hashem, those problems wouldn't come. The problems come because we reveal a certain fear. And the reason why the authorities were told about Moses' situation and what Moses did, which we consider a great mitzvah what he did, but the authorities in Egypt, they wanted to execute him. The reason why they found out was because Moses was afraid. And that's what the Torah is telling us. Fear is a terrible, terrible thing. It brings about problems. And if Moses would have been totally faithful in trusting in God, it actually wouldn't have happened. I have an interesting story that a friend of mine who I studied with in yeshiva, he shared with me. My friend went to college and he studied in Australia, in an Australian college, economy. And two of his friends went, after they graduated, they went to the same company for an interview. And the person interviewing them, after asking them many questions and checking them out, he asked them, "What are you expecting for your first year's salary?" So each one had their own meeting with the boss of this new company. And the boss asked each of them separately, independently. They were having their interview. And the boss asked one of them, "What are you expecting for your first year's salary?" And so the first one said, $40,000. Okay, and sure enough, finished the interview. And then the next friend of my friends was interviewed, and the boss asked him the same questions. And one of the questions was, "What are you expecting for your first year's salary?" And so this friend answered $80,000. And guess what? They both got hired. The first one got $40,000 salary, and the second one got an $80,000 salary. They went to the same school. They were both the same smart. And yet one of them got the first year a $40,000 salary, and the other one got an $80,000 salary. Why did one of them get double what the other one got? And the answer is they each had a certain level of trust in God, that God's going to help them get, this position. And they felt this is what they were trusting God that they're going to get what they felt. And the first one had trust that he's getting $40,000. So he said 40,000. The second one had trust and faith in Hashem that he's getting $80,000. So he said, I'm hoping to get $80,000. And guess what? That's what they got. They each got what they trusted. One of the lessons we learned from the famous book, Duties of Our Heart, Chevas Halavavos, is that by having trust and faith in Hashem, that brings about so much blessings. And I must say that we are honored today to have the Honorable Richard Bernstein, who truly has a lot of faith in Hashem by persevering numerous challenges and overcoming all these obstacles. Truly extraordinary, unique, and very, very special and high-level soul, because I must say anything that Richard does is really a very powerful thing, because the whole world is impressed. This is truly a very, very impressive individual. And whatever he does means so much. And whatever he shares with us, I'm truly thirsting to hear his words of wisdom. With no further ado, the Honorable Richard Bernstein.
Good evening, everybody. It is such a great pleasure to be here. I have been looking forward to this like you can't even know. And I just really hope that today we're going to have a chance to connect, and that we're going to have an opportunity to really get to know each other. So what I want to do is, instead of like just doing a lecture or doing a talk, I want to make this as interconnected as possible. So I want us to really have a conversation. And what I'm going to ask you to do, because it's hard for blind people to like just talk into a computer because we don't really know where we're talking or like even what's going on. I remember I was giving a lecture to some college students. In the middle of the lecture, I finally said to them, I said, is anybody even really listening? Because I'm not even interested, and I'm the one who's talking. And I just find that when we have to use this kind of a format, the more interactive we make it, the more we're going to have a chance to really learn from each other, and the more that we're going to have a chance to befriend each other and get to know each other. So what I'm going to ask you to do is I'm going to ask you to think of the most personal questions that you can possibly think of. The more personal you make your question, the more I'm going to enjoy having a chance to answer it. Any and every question is a great question, and any and every question is something that I would just be delighted to engage in conversation with you. So why don't we do this? Let me start with some background to kind of get our conversation rolling. So as the rabbi indicated, I am a Supreme Court justice from the state of Michigan, and the Supreme Court is our state's highest court. So in Michigan, we are elected to the Supreme Court, which is unique from Florida, where your governor makes appointments. So in Michigan, if you want to be on the state's highest court, you have to run for it. And it's a statewide election. It's be kind of analogous to running for Senate or Congress or any type of statewide position. It would be kind of similar to running for the state's highest court. So ultimately, you know, when you run for this, I happen to love the electoral process because it gave me an opportunity to connect with people, but also it gave me a chance to talk about blindness and the opportunity to talk about disability. So I know that we had mentioned in the introduction that I'm blind. I don't have kind of any vision. And what was fun about our campaign is the campaign slogan was actually blind justice, which I realize is a little corny, but I loved it because it created connection. and people felt that they could ask you questions and have conversation and have discussion, and that they weren't intimidated by the blind component. And it allowed people to kind of answer any questions or concerns they might have had, and it allowed for greater connection. So what does the Supreme Court of the state of Michigan do? And what do you do as a justice on the court? So there are 7 Supreme Court justices, including myself, so there's 6 others. And we are generalists, which means that we are the last word in all Michigan law. So what does that mean? Last word in all Michigan law. That means we are the last word in all criminal cases. So if a person is sentenced to life in prison, we're going to be their last appeal. We're going to be their last chance for freedom. We handle all civil matters for the state of Michigan. That would include environmental regulation. That would include anything dealing with tort. That would include utility regulation. That would include taxation. And that's what I really like about this job. As intensive and as challenging as this job is, the thing I really like about it is, it's just like what you do with the rabbi, which is what makes it so exciting, is that every day you have to learn something new. Every day you have to learn something different. And you have to really kind of focus and become educated in a whole new topic that you never thought you'd have to know. So for example, a typical day, I'm going to go from a murder case, I'm going to go to a sexual assault case, I'm going to go to a nuclear regulatory case. And how is it that you build a nuclear power plant? And what role does the Department of Environmental Quality play in the construction and the creation of a nuclear power plant? I'm going to have to study about water, how water is used, who can use it, where does it come from, what rights do people have to water, to zoning, to a taxation case where you're talking about billions of dollars. And ultimately, what did the legislature mean when it created this specific tax or tax loophole, and who's impacted by the taxpayer not paying it? If you rule that the taxation is unconstitutional, then what services have to be cut? Are you going to cut police? Are you going to cut fire? Are you going to cut schools? So every day there's something exciting. I would say the more challenging cases and the more difficult ones are when you deal with abuse and neglect. Those are the toughest cases, when you deal with parents that are going to be losing their children, and you're the last word as to whether or not they're going to have any parental rights over that child. So that's what makes the job so unique and so exciting. And we just had oral arguments today. So even though I'm here in Florida, we're doing everything remotely and telephonically. So even though I'm in this beautiful state with this beautiful weather, I was in court for pretty much the entire day. So it's one of those very intensive, very exhaustive days. But I think if you live with a sense of mission, and you live with a sense of purpose, and you live with a sense of focus, and you feel that your day was well spent, and you feel the time was well used, then I think that really allows for you to get so much out of your day, and it catalyzes you to have more energy and more excitement and more enthusiasm to kind of approach things. For me, I'd rather be overwhelmed by being busy and having so many things to do than not having enough things to do. Because I think the more active you are, the more energetic you are, the more that you ultimately kind of live life to its fullest extent, the more you get out of each and every day, and ultimately the more joy you're able to find, because you feel that you're created for a reason and for a purpose. So the other thing that we can get into, and then we'll dive in and start taking some questions and having conversation, is my other real passion is athletics. I love athletic competition. It is my absolute passion. And you might say to yourself, well, the guy's blind, so how does he do athletics? And I love it. I have completed 24 marathons, and I have also completed a full Ironman triathlon competition. And for those of you who are not familiar with the Ironman is a 2.4 mile swim, followed by a 112 mile bike, to be completed by a 26.2 mile run. And the rules of the competition are that if you stop, if you rest, if you take a break, you run the risk of missing a cutoff. And if you miss a cutoff, you're disqualified from the competition. So in order to participate in Ironman, it takes 2 years of training, work, and discipline in order to focus on the goal and in order to basically accomplish what you set out to do. But I happen to love any kind of athletic competition, you get to be on a team, you get to work out with a group of people. And I think that sense of team spirit is what makes it unique and exciting. So those are kind of our pretexts. I just want to kind of give you some ideas. And now the conversation is going to open to you so that you guys can lead us, and anything and everything you guys want to talk about is on the table. So who would like to start with the first question or comment to kind of get our conversation moving? Very dramatic. It's so hard for blind people, everybody, to do this because blind people are so used to feeling people's energy. And it's so hard to talk into a screen because we need to be on people. For blind people, we have to have people near us and around us so we can feel and understand and appreciate that they're there and sense the energy that they have. But this will be the next best thing. Okay, who's got a question or comment? Anybody?
Yes, I
I
would
have a
like to ask
question.
you a question.
Oh, perfect. Okay.
I'd like to know what schools you went to.
So the question was, what schools did I go to? So I grew up in Bloomfield Hills, Michigan, and I am a product of special education, public schools, but I am a special ed student, which I'm very proud of, which means I wasn't in a normal classroom. I was educated, primarily through the state's special education programs and services. That's how I got my education. So I went to public school, basically, elementary, middle school, and high school. What's interesting is that people like me who are blind have to go to public school because private schools won't take us. So the only venue that we really have open to us are the public schools. So my parents were remarkable in this regard that I remember we moved. I was so upset because, I do what all kids do. You have to make your parents crazy and make their life miserable because that's what we do. And show no gratitude or appreciation, but that they know in the end that you do appreciate it. But I remember we were in the West Bloomfield public school system, and my parents moved us like 2 blocks away. Like it was like we didn't even go far, but we moved from the West Bloomfield School District into the Bloomfield Hills School District. And I kept saying to them, why do we have to do this? Because I had to go to a home school. And I was going to lose all my friends. I had to start over. And I used to I would just drive my family crazy. I would tell them, oh, how can you take a child away from their friends? You just don't do that. And the whole reason that they did it was because they wanted the Bloomfield Hills public school system. And the Bloomfield Hills public school system was remarkable in the special education programs and services that the district was able to provide. And they were incredible services and programs. I got the best education you could ever hope for. And then after graduating from Andover High School, I went on to the University of Michigan where I did my undergrad. And then after graduating from the University of Michigan, I went on to Northwestern University School of Law, where I got my Juris Doctorate.
Wow.
Yeah, it was, the education was very tough as a blind person because you have to fight for everything and nothing comes easy and everything's kind of a battle. But then the thing I liked about education was I became a professor at the University of Michigan, and I used to teach political science. And I so enjoyed that. I used to love teaching. I used to love, being with students and getting them excited and getting them enthused. And then for my first elected office, I ran for the Board of Governors of Wayne State, which is a large university research institute in Detroit. About 35,000 students and a hospital system. And it was a statewide election. So I ran for that position, but I didn't think I was going to win. I just ran because I thought I could use it as a platform to really get people excited about disabilities and to let people see what was possible. But the problem is I worked really hard at it, and I went to all the counties in the state, and I was very enthusiastic and really energetic that I wound up winning. And then all of a sudden when I won, I said to myself, oh my God, it's an 8-year term and I got to run a school. And I said, oh my God, I said, I didn't anticipate winning to be a Board of Governors member at Wayne State. And I said, oh my God, this is like a major job. You have to run the school and you have to handle the budgets and the financing and oversee the president and the administration and the hospital system. And I just said, oh my Lord. And I did that for 8 years. I was on the board of governors at Wayne State and then ultimately became the chair of the board. And then so I really love anything done with education. And then a couple of years after that, I ran for the Supreme Court. Next question.
Yeah, hi, Richard. My name is Mike from Aventura, Florida.
Hello, Mike.
Hi, two quick questions. Number one, did you ever want to get into broadcasting the way many blind people, including myself, wanted to do? And number two, what do you think of the ADA?
It's two great questions. I mean, I never really thought about getting into broadcasting. I think that sounds kind of cool and exciting. I don't think anybody would really watch me. So I don't know if I really have the ratings to be a good broadcaster because I don't think that I would have the audience to be able to do it. But secondly, I think the Americans with Disabilities Act is probably, for people with disabilities, the greatest civil rights legislation that we could ever have hoped for. I mean, for us, it's our greatest moment. The ADA gives us freedom. It gives us opportunity. It gives us our independence. It allows for us to, go to restaurants. It allows for us to fly on airplanes. It allows for us to go into commercial facilities. It allows for us to do anything and everything that we hope to do. I mean, the American Disabilities Act, for all intents and purposes, created for us the lives that we always hoped and prayed and dreamed that we could one day have. And in fact, before I went to become a Supreme Court justice, that was my entire life's work, was civil rights through the ADA. I fought to make sure that paralyzed veterans under the ADA had access to things, to programs, to services, to jobs, to buildings, to facilities, to education, to all those types of things. So I am a huge proponent of the American Disabilities Act because it does the thing, and if you read the preamble of the ADA, it really emphasizes why it's so important because it talks about the isolation and the struggles of isolation that people with disabilities have and the difficulties of isolation and how the ADA was really designed to allow for folks to realize the potential of those who have been forgotten or those who ultimately live within the shadows. Who's got our next question?
Yeah,
think you
I
should
didn't
try to
introduce
go into
myself
law.
before. I want to introduce myself now, Ben Resnick.
It's
And
nice to
I
meet you.
wanted to ask you, what was the most important case that you feel that you had a deciding vote on in the court?
Okay, so that's a great question. So the question is, do you want to talk about cases that I litigated or cases that I decided as a justice?
The one that you had, because you were seven justices, one
Yes.
must be a deciding vote.
Oh,
Was
okay.
there
So,
a case that you had the deciding vote?
well, what happens in the court is the way that it really works is you want to work with your colleagues. If you really are committed to something and you're very passionate about something and you really believe in something, the people on the court like each other and they respect each other. And, people, it's a really nice group of people. And, and people have we just have affection for each other. Like people genuinely like each other. And, I tend to be more progressive and there's people that are more conservative. But what happens is that we really like each other. Like that's the thing. Like people care about each other and they look after each other. And there's actual real friendships that develop on the court. And it makes it a very powerful thing when you have these genuine friendships. That way you can exchange and discuss ideas. But there's a few cases. I mean, the thing is that for me, I work about 10 to 12 hours every single day. Because what happens is that if it takes you an hour to do something, it takes me 5 hours to do the exact same thing. So it's a 1 to 5 ratio. So for every hour you spend doing something, you have to multiply it by 5 for it to come out to be something that I'm able to do. So it's literally a 1 to 5 ratio. And people say like, God, why do you do that? You memorize the cases, you internalize the documents. I mean, the level of preparation is massive. You go for weeks without sleeping. I mean, it's just the most grueling job you could possibly have that never ends, and it's kind of exhausting, and yet you keep doing it. And why do you keep doing this and putting yourself through, a position and a job which really is an exhaustive, intensive position? And the answer to the question, which you posed, is this: is that, and this happens a lot. There's a case, and you can actually look it up, because once a case is published, we are free to talk all about it. And there was a case, and if any of you have a computer and you're able to type it in, you can see the actual case. It was called, the title, the two defendants were Johnson and Scott. Johnson and Scott. If you type in Johnson, Scott, and Bernstein, because I was the opinion writer, you pull up the case. Johnson, Scott, and Bernstein. It's when you ask, why do you do this job? And what's the case that really defined this position? And what's the case that really kind of allowed for this to have meaning and to make this all worthwhile? This is one of those cases. I have many of these cases, but this is one of them. And this case was two young men who were convicted of first-degree murder and who were sentenced to life in prison. Now, keep in mind, by the time the case worked its way up to my court, they had spent about 18 years in custody. They spent about 18 years. They went away when they were arrested when they were like 18. Now they're like 36 years old. So unfortunately, a huge portion of their life was ultimately taken from them. But at least, in the opinion that I was able to write and was able to craft, and through the investigations that took place, they were completely innocent and had nothing to do with the crime. Totally innocent, and had just been railroaded by the system and were sent to languish for over 18 years in prison for a crime they had no part of and had nothing to do with. Wrong place, wrong time, corrupt situation that basically led to them losing, for all intents and purposes, their entire lives. But at least, when you write the decision and you get your colleagues to sign off on it, and then the order is entered, that order goes right to the Department of Corrections, and they are, once that decision comes out, once the opinion comes out, and it's sent to the Department of Corrections, what's incredible is they have to be removed and released from the prison campus immediately. And that's the thing that makes you feel good about this job, is that once you sign that order and you know that a person who's innocent is going to be released, and not released in a day or two, the minute that order is signed and that order is entered, the warden is under obligation to have that person removed from the prison complex immediately. And it's actually kind of interesting what sometimes happens, is because you have people that are in prisons far from their homes. You have people that are in a prison, let's say in the Upper Peninsula, and they're from, Southeast Michigan. Well, what do? They have to be released immediately, but they're 10 hours from home. So that creates some other issues that the Department of Corrections has to work through. But that's the beauty of this position, is the opportunity and the ability to, even though you're never going to really give a person their life back, at least their situation is going to be a little bit better than it once was. Okay, next question.
Thank you.
You bet.
Richard, do you feel, okay, I'm very opinionated on this. Do you feel that the pandemic with the virus situation, as a blind person, is holding blind people back? I do in many ways, especially with me not only being blind, but being hard of hearing and wearing a mask. I find it extremely difficult.
So it's a great question. The pandemic for me has been the worst thing that's ever happened in my entire life. And I want to just, give it some context, which is that ultimately, being from Detroit, and I say this just to kind of give some background, I had 5 very close friends who died from corona. So these are 5 people that I was very close with who have have since passed on due to the coronavirus.
Oh,
Having
wow.
said that, yes, but having said that, this is important because I say that just because, you know, I want people to understand that I recognize the dangers and difficulties and hardships that the pandemic is placing. You know, I'm not a person who denies its horrible nature. I get how bad it is. I recognize how bad it is. I respect the pandemic and I respect how horrible it is because I've seen it firsthand in the fact that I know 5 people I was close with who are now gone. Having said that, I think that the challenge for blind people and other people with disabilities is something which is indescribable. And I think that what you have to do when you're dealing with a situation of this nature is you have to figure out what the balance is. And I think the question that we all have to pose and that we all have to ask is are we balancing it correctly? And what do I mean by that? You know, people who are blind like me are isolated, and the isolation can take you to levels of depression that are indescribable. And I will just tell you, like, personally, you know, for me, you know, it was one of those situations where, you know, when Michigan closed everything down, they didn't think about people with disabilities. They didn't think about people who were blind. And I was having a hard time. You know, my fiance lives in New York, so we weren't able to get back and forth to see each other because this hit so quickly and everything shut down so fast. But I mean, I wasn't able to get food. Like, it was very difficult. You couldn't use apps because apps are not accessible. The state shut down Uber and said that, you know, you had to demonstrate that what you were doing or where you were going was deemed to be essential. And the government got to decide, you know, what was and what wasn't essential. So if you needed to use Uber, you couldn't use Uber because if you tried to order it, you know, if it wasn't deemed to be essential, you weren't able to use the app or to go places. And I remember asking grocery stores, you know, how do I get food? And they would say, well, you know, we can't deliver. It's going to take us about 3 to 4 weeks to deliver. So you couldn't get food that way. And I was having a really hard time. And so I remember I found in my town of Birmingham, there was like a smoothie shop called Beyond Juice. And I really liked this place. And I went to them and I said, look, you know, I'm kind of hungry. I said, I'm having trouble getting food. This is becoming a real problem. I said, I can't use your app because it's inaccessible. I said, can I come in to the store and buy things in person? You know, give you a credit card or give you cash and be able to buy food. And they had to get special permission from the public health department to allow for me to be able to come in person just so I could buy my food. And for an entire month, I got the same thing every single day. So it was like literally, I had a salad and a smoothie for an entire month. So I think that there's a certain balance that you have to find. And I think the key to a balance is that, you know, you have to respect the pandemic. Well, at the same time, you still have to also find this balance to allow for people's rights and liberties to be respected as well, and allow for folks to be able to know and appreciate risk assessment and be able to act within that accordingly. So I think that with anything, you have to make sure that you have a balance. You have respect. It's like the ocean. You don't go out into the ocean in a storm. You always focus on respecting the ocean. You have respect for it.
No,
In this situation, you respect the pandemic, you respect its
10
danger,
minutes.
its issue, and you
I'm
respect
listening.
the fact that it can
I don't
that
want
it
to talk.
that it can rob you of your life. Well, at the same time, you have to respect the fact that there's other people who are struggling because of the social isolation and recognize that social isolation is a real thing. Okay, next question.
I'm on Zoom.
Hi, I have a question.
Yes.
I have a question. Hi, I'm Bob. I'm from New York and
Yes.
lived in Aventura and now in San Diego. I
Okay.
have a legal services background.
Okay.
I studied undergrad, American constitutional origins.
Oh,
My
wow.
question is not specifically about disability, but as both a Jew and a jurist, justice is very important. How do you reconcile issues where there are miscarriages of justice, either through political pressure or through what I would term perversion of the understanding of the law and the Constitution? Am
Well,
I
I think,
being clear?
yeah, I think it's a great question. I think the key is that good judges really don't adhere to political pressure. They really do follow the law, and the law is pretty straightforward, and they really do follow the Constitution. Good judges do. I think when people become judges and they wear the robe, they understand and they respect what comes out of that. They recognize what it means to be a judge, and they recognize what it means to be a good judge and to follow the law and make difficult decisions. And I think, you know, when I look at the opinions that I've written and the decisions that I've had to make, you know, I am proud of the work that I do. And I will tell you, I'm proud of my colleagues in all the different areas of the judiciary, whether it's the lower courts, the trial courts, the appellate courts, whatever it is. I have, you know, you will find people that have different interpretations of the Constitution, and you find people that have different interpretations of the law, right? They just see things in a different way. Some people see the Constitution as a dynamic document, other people see it as a static document. But the key is that I think that what I've found, and the reason I like my colleagues so much, is that you might agree or disagree with their interpretation of the statute versus their interpretation of the Constitution. But they are sincere and genuine in their beliefs, and that always has to be respected. Next question.
Well, I just, a point specifically that is sore point to me. When I studied American constitutional origins, we had a strict interpretation of the Second Amendment,
right?
The right to maintain a well-regulated militia. However, in the Supreme Court of the United States, Justice Scalia, with the influence of the NRA, supposedly a strict constructionalist, expanded a well-regulated militia to the consequence of any Michigana who wants to have a gun and go in and shoot people, and opened up a can of worms. So in my humble opinion, the decision was, you know, politically motivated, A, and B, not following the judicial principles of strict construction, and in violation of the original precepts of the Declaration and the Constitution.
Yeah, I mean, I can't really comment as to that. I just can only content that, you know, I mean, once a person's, you know, in my situation, I'm elected every 8 years by the whole state. In the federal system, you know, they're there for life. So under the theory, in terms of how it should be, they should basically kind of be independent, because why not, right? They're there for life, and you know, as long as the Constitution specifically says that they remain in good behavior, you know, they should be able to maintain their position. So for the most part, politics shouldn't really play a role, because it doesn't really affect, or should it affect, the decisions that they're making, because it doesn't affect them in a personal capacity. Now, I'm curious if anybody has any question about how do you actually do this job if you're blind? You know, how do you, you know, I'm just curious if anybody has a curiosity as to how does it work if you can't see? Like, how do you do this job if you have no vision? Any takers?
Yeah, Mike.
Yeah, I'll try. Do you get your paperwork in Braille? Do you have a Braille typewriter?
So that's a great question. So for this position, Braille isn't going to be a way, it's not going to be a mechanism that's going to work. So you can't really use Braille to be a Supreme Court justice. And the reason is that it's too voluminous. There's too much material. So here's how it works. Every single Wednesday in Lansing, Michigan, there are 25 cases that have to be ruled on. And you're basically deciding at conference which cases you're going to grant leave to and which cases you're not. So it's kind of like a you have a conference with the other 6 justices, and you're going to make a decision as to which cases the court is going to hear and which cases the court is going to reject. But for most of the people, this is like the end of the road, right? So whatever the court decides, this is it for most of these folks. This is it. This is all she wrote. So people say, okay, so you're blind. How do you go to conference? So think about conference. You have 7 people sitting around a table and 2 commissioners. And you are literally making decisions that are going to affect people's entire fate. You're going to make decisions that are going to affect people's entire life. That's how intense it gets. And so, oh, wait, you're blind. How does this work? So people say, what about Braille? Can you put the materials into Braille? Well, you can't use Braille because if I give you 1 textbook page, you're going to give me about 70 Braille pages. So if you're going through a murder trial and it's a 3-week murder trial, that's just not going to work, because if you've got a 3-week murder trial, you can't put that into Braille because it's just too massive, right? It's just not going to work. Then you're thinking, well, what about the computer? Can you use technology? Well, technology, you're going to strike out with that too. And the reason technology isn't going to work is because if I'm on my headset listening, like if I'm listening on my headset, I'm not able to converse with you. I can't interact with you. And if I can't interact with you and I can't converse with you, then for all intents and purposes, there's no reason to be in conference because you're not really participating. So what I'm left with is one option. I have to memorize all 25 cases every single week. Wow. Now you can't memorize all the cases word for word. You can't do that. So you can't, there's no way you can memorize, 25 massive cases that are so voluminous. That's just not going to be possible. But you can learn all the key legal issues within that case. So if it's a question of hearsay, if it's a question of admissibility, if it's a question of sentencing, if it's a question of just any of the various legal issues that will come up with in each case, I will know that case to such an extent and with such intensity that what will happen is the commissioner is going to say, okay, we have now gotten to case 18. And they'll say, okay, case 18 is a carjacking on Woodward Avenue that resulted in 2 homicides. So if I hear carjacking resulting in 2 homicides, I can recall the case in its entirety. And then what I'll do is basically be able to convey to you, how I see it and why I believe that the court should go in one direction or another. Now, there is one other challenge that comes with this job that makes it even more grueling and even more difficult. And that is we're a common law system. So you can't just simply say, oh, you know what? I think this case was unfair. And I think this case was unjust. So we need to overturn that conviction. That you can't do. You have to be able to use all the corresponding common law cases to make your argument. So if you think that, a case should go in a certain direction, you have to be able to argue all the relevant cases that make your point. Okay, let's say, did the officer have plain view of the weapon? And what constitutes plain view? There's going to be a number of cases that are going to be on point that you're going to go through and, make your argument that this case is relevant. But then on top of that, you then have to know all the cases that work against you, because one of your colleagues is going to say, well, Richard, that's fine, but what about case A, B, and C where the court held the opposite? You have to be able to distinguish that case from the case that you're arguing. So you got to know the cases for and against and make your argument as persuasive as possible in order to get your colleagues to go along with you as to how they're going to vote.
Wow.
Amazing.
So do any of you have any questions about athletics? Like how you do an Ironman?
Yes. Hi, my
Yes.
name is Bella Friedman and my family is watching with me.
Oh, wonderful.
And I was wondering, like, if you had a role model with anything, like what motivated you or encouraged you to do, the athletics or even the justice system. And
You didn't have a chance.
also, another question is
You didn't
that
have a chance to ask your question.
I know.
another question
You
is
can
that,
try it again.
like, I'm a swimmer, and swimming is like, really you really need to see things while you're going. So
Right.
how can you swim, be part of a race, and like know where you're going? Those are my two questions.
So to do a marathon, I run with a group called Achilles. And what Achilles does is you run with a team of guides, and they give you directional cues: hard right, soft right, hard left, soft left. And you hold a tether so you can feel the motion of their body. And then you feel how their body moves by the motion of the tether. And then also, again, they're going to be giving you these directional cues. They're going to say to you, okay, hard right, hard left, soft left. And you've got to follow those directions explicitly. Your question is, with the Ironman, how does that all work, right? Like, how do you swim 2.4 miles? How do you run 112? Excuse me, the Ironman's a 2.4 mile swim. It's a 112-mile bike and a 26.2 mile run. So you got to put the three together. And it takes about 2 years of training in order to be able to compete in an Ironman competition. So your question is, all right, so how does the swim work? How does that even work? So, okay, so to do the swim, it's a 2.4 mile swim. I did it in Lake Coeur d'Alene. And the water temperature of Lake Coeur d'Alene was 55 degrees. So when you dive in, it's so frigid that you actually get like a series of convulsions that starts to hit you. And then they call it the washing machine, because what's happening is all of the swimmers are basically, really what happens is, like, it's not, people don't mean for this to happen, but it's a highly competitive situation. So all the swimmers, hit each other in the face, they swim on top of each other, they kick each other. So it gets a little intense. It's not because people want to like hit you in the face, but it's just simply because it's just the way it is that it's highly competitive, and this is what people do. So what happens is that as you're swimming, you have a rope around your waist and around your guide's waist. And you basically, when your guide wants you to go a certain direction, he'll tug at the rope. He'll tug you to the right, he'll tug you to the left, and he'll make that tug as an indication as to which direction you should swim. Now, there's a little bit of a challenge that comes in, is because all the other swimmers swim on top of you. Because if you're not going fast enough, they push you down and go above you. And then they kick you in the face. And then you're not able to brace for like the ensuing impact when someone hits you in the face. And then you have another little challenge, which is, as you're swimming, what winds up happening is that other swimmers become entangled in the rope that connects you to your guide. So as you're swimming, the rope gets entangled and gets ensnared. And when the rope gets ensnared with another swimmer, it starts to constrict you and it brings you below the surface. So the rope does that. So what happens is the rope, when someone else gets tangled, it will take you below the water line and make it so that you can't get oxygen and you can't get air, because when people are swimming and they're panicking and they're tangled in a rope, it just gets very constrictive. And when it gets constrictive, it starts taking you below the water line, and then breathing becomes very difficult. So as you're going through this, you got to work at it. You got to keep calm. You got to keep a good disposition. You've got to keep a certain peaceful spirit. And you basically have to kind of just push yourself forward through it in a calm, calculated, relaxed way. Get yourself untangled, and then guess what happens? The whole process happens again. After you free yourself, you're going to get another tangled rope, and you're going to start to feel drowning again. And then after you finish the swim, you then get on a tandem bike and you ride for 112 miles on a tandem bike. And as you ride, you're on the mountains and you're going at speeds of in excess of 50 miles an hour. And because you're going at such high rates of speed on a tandem, you have to be completely in sync with what you call them the captains. You're the captain and the stoker. And basically you're pedaling together. And what's going to happen is the captain is going to say to you, lean hard right. And when you hear lean hard right, you better lean hard right. Because if you don't lean hard right when he tells you to lean hard right, the bike is going to ultimately flip over. And then if he says to you, lean hard left, you better lean hard left when he gives you that command. Because the Ironman that I did, there was a wonderful young lady who did not have a disability, but she fell off of her bike during the competition and she broke her neck. So
Wow.
it's a serious situation. You got to train for it. You got to be respectful of it. You got to know what you're getting into. But in the end, it usually finds its way to working out.
I have a training question for you.
Yes.
With your schedule of 12 hours a day working,
right?
And I know a lot of people during work are not eating properly,
right?
They're interrupted or anything. Where do you find the time and make sure you're on diet? Because I know people who just run marathons, not Ironman, and it's been very impactful in their life. They have to give up a lot for it. So I'm curious how you balance it so well. Not just wells, but so well.
So you got to want it, right? You got to want it and you got to organize it and you got to just structure your day and you have to have the necessary level of discipline in order to make it work. But it's just one of those situations where, like in life, it's just something you got to want. I do a lot of consulting with the Israeli Defense Forces, and we're doing programs on how to integrate the units so that people with disabilities who want to serve can have a chance to be a part of a unit. And I go to Israel usually about 5 times a year to kind of work on this initiative. And a lot of it you learn from military is that you need to be disciplined, you need to be focused, you need to be structured. And basically you have a certain list of things that have to be accomplished and achieved within each day. So you kind of know before the day is over, there are certain priorities and requirements that need to be accomplished and satisfied in order to allow for the day to be deemed a successful day, to be merited as a good day. So that's the key. It's just structure and discipline that you have to adhere to. Because I also travel a lot. Even during the pandemic, I just had to, I kind of have just move on, right? Like for me, my attitude is, I'm actually heading on Saturday, I'm heading to the United Arab Emirates, because the UAE now has a full peace accord with Israel. So we're going to be doing a number of exciting events and really cool things in the UAE to help to celebrate the new peace accord that's been established between Jerusalem and Dubai and Jerusalem and Abu Dhabi. So there's a lot of exciting things that are kind of happening kind of in that context. But you have to balance all this stuff out and basically make sure that you're able to ultimately basically structure your schedule. Like, it was interesting before the pandemic, and my hope is that when the pandemic comes to a close, hopefully the next couple of months, we'll be able to get back into this again. But prior to the pandemic, I was traveling, I don't know, December, January, and February of 2020, I was in, where was I? I was in China, I was in India. In December, January, February, before the pandemic kind of started raging, my typical travel schedule was, just because I get very passionate about my work and I love what I'm doing and I believe in it so strongly, and it's a pellet, so you can do it from anywhere. But I was in China, I was in India, I was in Cyprus, I was in Israel, I was in Hawaii. There were like 5 different countries I was at in like a 6-week period. And it's just, a lot of it is momentum. If you have a certain energy level, that energy level gives you the momentum. Like in India, that was something I really, really enjoyed doing, because in India, people who are blind are considered to be the bottom of the caste system. So if you're blind and you live in India, you are considered the bottom, the absolute bottom. There's nobody lower than you in the caste system. In fact, the belief system is that, if you're blind because you deserve it, because you're an evil person, you did something horrible in a past life, and you're having to pay for what you did. So nobody should have any sympathy or empathy for you because you don't merit it. And the idea of a blind person having any kind of a position is just unheard of. So what I loved about India was we're doing a project now with the Supreme Court of India and I'm excited about where this is going. I think I actually have to go back to India in October, depending on the pandemic. But the goal is, when I was in India the first time, I was working in Mumbai, and we were in the working in the orphanages and the schools and all these places where you had disabled children that were basically abandoned because nobody wanted them, because they're seen as being worthless and having no value. And so the idea was that if you could create a scenario where people saw that these people had some value and had, some purpose and meaning, and the idea of being a blind judge was just unheard of, because the idea of a blind person judging another person made no sense. How can you judge someone if you're the bottom of the caste system? But it created a whole conversation, a whole discussion throughout India. Unfortunately, then Corona hit, so it kind of derailed it. But I was very surprised, because a couple of weeks ago, I got a call from the Supreme Court of India, and they said, look, we want to re-engage, and we want to start pushing forward on this initiative, and we don't want to lose this initiative. We want to keep the initiative going, and it shouldn't be an initiative that should be, it shouldn't be an initiative that should be lost. It should be an initiative that we can continue doing. So a lot of it is, at the end of the day, you need to focus on what you believe in, structure it, have the energy, have the enthusiasm, work 12 hours a day, travel the world, and do what you need to do in order to accomplish your objective. And usually Hashem will give you the strength and the ability to do it. So before we wrap up, I just want to tell you, if I can I just share one quick story and then we'll conclude?
Sure.
Okay, so I want to share one story that I really believe kind of defines why we as people do what we do. And it's the way that I kind of like to see things, but it's the story, of course, of the angel coming upon Jacob. And as you all know, there existed a tremendous battle that raged through the night until the next morning, when the angel blessed Jacob and gave him a new name. The name, of course, was Israel. And I always believe that when you look at scripture, Israel means one who struggles with God, one who fights with Hashem. And I think, as we know, as we know how the scripture goes, Jacob was left, he after that struggle, he was left with a shattered hip. He was left in great pain, and he had to basically walk with a limp for the rest of his life. And I believe that this happened to Jacob for a reason. This is just my belief. I believe that he was left with this injury because it was only through his struggle, and it's only through his pain and through his hardship and his challenge and his difficulty that he was able to be empathetic, that he was able to be understanding, he was able to be compassionate. And I think that there's a real reason for that, which is the idea that you can never be a leader unless you understand and you know how to relate to other people, unless you can empathize, unless you can connect, unless you can see the good in folks. But you have to be able to see and understand and appreciate the struggles in those in which surround you. And I really have come to believe that that is why Jacob was given the challenges and difficulties that he was, because it was only for those challenges that he was able to become a leader and the father of a nation. So with that, I think we come to the belief, and I think Chabad teaches us this, that for many of us, we are mortal, and for many of us, we're infirmed. For people like me, we have a lot of infirmities. I had a bad accident in New York. I got hit by a bike. I was in the trauma unit for 10 weeks and had to learn how to walk again. But the point of it is that I think what you tend to find is that even though the body has infirmities, I think what you realize is the spirit and the soul are able to reach new heights. And even with the body's infirmity, it's the spirit that ultimately guides, it's the spirit that dictates, and it's the spirit that leads. So with that, I wish you all a wonderful, good year in 2021. May we all have a chance to come together again and do this again, but may we all have a chance to do this in person. And now I turn it back over to our leader, the great rabbi.
Thank you very much. It was wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And
Thank
good luck.
you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you,
Richard,
Robert.
Thank you very
It
much.
was so
Thank you,
nice.
Rabbi
I just want to
Smith.
mention that we have the same Zoom number. We have Torah classes every single day. A lot of you are on it, but those that aren't, every single day, you're welcome to join the same Zoom number, 10
At what
a.m.
time?
every day, 10 a.m. In the morning, we've got, we study the Talmud and Tanya, Jewish mysticism. And in the afternoon, at 3 p.m. to 4 p.m., every day is something different. And we have a variety of Jewish topics. And we encourage you and you to come and tell your friends about it. And you can enjoy and feel fulfilled and learn Torah, do mitzvahs, and make the world a better place. So we thank you so much for joining us. And
Thank
Richard,
you.
that was unbelievable. That was really, really inspirational and motivational and encouraging. And really, there's no excuse. Really, what Richard is telling us, no one has any excuse not to accomplish anything they want to. We all have the tremendous abilities, and we should also try to do whatever we can. The more, the better. Yasha Koyach, thank you so much, and have a wonderful evening. We'll see you tomorrow.
Thank you
at the
very
Torah
much.
class.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Rabbi,
Yes.
thank you for having him on your show tonight.
You're very welcome.